If someone had told me that an advanced life drawing class would dismantle my life, I would have laughed. My life was not a thing to be dismantled. It was a carefully constructed fortress of solitude, built from sharpened pencils, pristine paper, and a routine so predictable it was practically a law of physics. I woke at 6, sketched for an hour, attended my classes at the university, and returned to my small, quiet apartment to draw until my eyes burned. It was a life lived in shades of graphite, and I liked it that way. I didn't come to the art department looking for anything other than a degree. Certainly not for connection. Connection was messy. It was unpredictable. It was everything my art was not. My work was about control, about capturing the precise curve of a spine or the exact shadow a collarbone casts on skin. It was about seeing, not being seen. And then there was Julian. Julian was the antithesis of my entire existence. He didn't walk into a room. He occupied it, a force of nature that sucked up all the oxygen and light. He was a sculptor, and he carried himself like he was hewn from the same stone he worked, all broad shoulders and solid mass. His hands, which I tried very hard not to look at, were perpetually dusted with clay or stained with paint, his knuckles scarred from some imagined battle with his medium. He was loud. His laughter was a sudden thunderclap in the hallowed quiet of the art studio. His critiques were blunt, often brutal, delivered with a shrug as if the truth was a simple, unavoidable object he'd just happened to trip over. He was chaos in human form, and I hated him for it. Or, more accurately, I was terrified of him. He was a vibrant, saturated oil painting in my world of delicate cross-hatching. In our life drawing class, we were polar opposites. My easel was always in the corner, my drawings precise, anatomical, almost sterile. I measured angles, obsessed over foreshortening, and rendered flesh with a clinical detachment. Julian's easel was always front and center. He didn't draw so much as attack the paper. His charcoal lines were thick, angry slashes of black. His figures were pure emotion, distorted for impact, full of a raw, untamed energy that I both envied and despised. Our professor, a wizened woman named Alara, praised us both. She called my work exquisitely rendered, and as powerfully expressive. She saw two sides of the same coin. I saw an insurmountable wall between us. We never spoke. For 2 full semesters, we existed in the same room 3 times a week, breathing the same air thick with the scent of turpentine and graphite, and we never exchanged a single word. I observed him, of course. It was my nature. I noticed the way he chewed on the end of his charcoal stick when he was frustrated. I saw the deep crease that would form between his brows when a line wouldn't cooperate. I cataloged the small, chipped tooth that was only visible when he threw his head back to laugh. These observations were my secret. They were dangerous little details I collected like a magpie, stored away in a locked part of my brain. They were proof that I was seeing him, even as I worked tirelessly to remain invisible myself. The distance was my shield, a professional rivalry, an unspoken agreement of mutual avoidance. It was safe, until it wasn't. The disruption came, as they always do, without warning. It arrived in the form of Professor Alara's favorite end-of-year tradition, the paired final project. My stomach plummeted the moment she announced it. Working with someone else, sharing my space, my process. It was a nightmare. "I want you to push each other," she'd said, her eyes twinkling with a particular kind of professorial sadism. "I want you to find a synthesis, a dialogue between 2 different artistic voices." She started reading the pairings. My heart became a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. Not him. Please, anyone but him. And finally, a pairing I am very excited to see, she announced, her gaze flicking between my corner and the center of the room. Leo and Julian. The name hit me like a physical blow. The room went silent for a beat. I could feel every eye turn towards me, then towards him. I risked a glance. Julian was looking right at me, his expression unreadable. Not angry, not pleased, just watching, as if he were seeing me for the first time, a specimen to be analyzed. Then he gave a slow, lazy smirk, a gesture that made my blood run cold with dread. The project was a series of 5 large-scale pieces on the theme of anatomy of a modern myth. We were forced to meet, forced to talk. Our first conversation was excruciating. We stood awkwardly outside the studio, the bustle of other students a world away. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the soles of my feet. He leaned against the brick wall, all casual confidence. "My place or yours?" The question was simple, but it felt loaded with 1,000 implications I couldn't begin to decipher. My apartment was my sanctuary. The idea of him inside it, his large presence filling my small, ordered space, was unthinkable. But his studio, from what I'd heard, was a chaotic cavern of clay dust, half-finished projects, and loud music. My anxiety recoiled from both options. "My apartment is small," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Small is fine," he shrugged. "I just need a wall to work on. And coffee. You have coffee, right, pencil boy?" Pencil boy. The name should have been an insult, a confirmation of my perception of him as an arrogant bully. But the way he said it, with that ghost of a smirk, it felt less like a jab and more like a name. A nickname. A thing that existed between us. And that was somehow worse. So he came to my apartment. He arrived the next afternoon, and the moment I opened the door, my carefully curated world tilted on its axis. He was bigger in my doorway than he was in the studio. He had to duck his head to get inside, and he brought the scent of the outdoors with him, cold air, wet earth, and something uniquely him, something metallic and sharp like clay. He stood in the middle of my living room, which also served as my studio, and slowly turned in a circle. His eyes took everything in. The neat stacks of paper, the orderly rows of pencils and pens arranged by size and hardness, the anatomical charts pinned to the wall, the quiet grayness of it all. "Wow," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was impressed or horrified. "It's clean, I like it clean," I said, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. "A defensive posture." "I can see that," he replied, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time. It transformed his face, softening the harsh angles. My stomach did a slow, sick flip. We worked for hours. Or rather, we tried. We argued about concepts. He wanted to do something bold and political about the myth of the self-made man. I wanted to explore the quiet, internal mythology of memory. We were at a complete impasse. The air crackled with tension. He paced my small apartment like a caged tiger, his heavy footsteps a stark contrast to my usual monastic silence. He touched everything. He picked up one of my finished sketches, a detailed study of a hand, and held it close to his face. I felt a hot flush of panic, the same feeling as someone reading your diary. "How do you do this?" he asked, his voice softer now, laced with something that sounded like wonder. "Every line is so certain, it's just practice," I mumbled, staring at the floor. "No, it's not," he said, placing the drawing back down with a reverence that surprised me. "It's how you see. It's like you have a microscope for an eye." I didn't know what to say to that. It was the closest anyone had ever come to understanding. The project forced me to observe him up close, without the safety of distance. I was no longer just cataloging details from across a room. I was immersed in them. I noticed the fine, white scars that crisscrossed his forearms, pale lines against his tan skin. I saw the way the muscles in his back and shoulders shifted under his shirt as he stretched. I learned that the chip in his tooth came from childhood accident involving a bicycle and a very stubborn curb. He told me the story while sketching, a rare moment of unguarded narrative. I saw the exhaustion that lived in the corners of his eyes, an exhaustion his loud persona worked so hard to conceal. I saw the frustration when an idea wouldn't translate from his head to the page, his big hands clenching into fists of impotent rage. I saw him not as a monolith of confidence, but as a person, flawed and tired and trying. And it was undoing me, thread by thread. The first touch happened on the 3rd day. We were on the floor, surrounded by huge sheets of paper, brainstorming ideas. He was talking animatedly about Icarus, about the beautiful arrogance of flying too close to the sun. I was only half listening, mesmerized by the way his hands moved when he spoke, sculpting ideas out of thin air. We both reached for the same stick of thick, black charcoal at the same time. His fingers brushed against mine. It wasn't a small touch. The whole back of his hand slid against my knuckles. A jolt, pure and electric, shot up my arm and detonated somewhere in my chest. It was like being struck by lightning. White-hot and stunning. My breath hitched. I snatched my hand back as if I'd touched a hot stove. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, panicked rhythm. Too close. This is too close. I looked at him, my eyes wide with a terror I couldn't hide. He was staring at our hands, or where our hands had been. His motion had frozen. For a long, stretched-out second, he didn't move, didn't breathe. His ever-present smirk was gone, replaced by a look of profound surprise. Then he blinked, slowly, and picked up the charcoal. He didn't look at me. He cleared his throat and went back to talking about Icarus, but his voice was different, a little rougher, a little less certain. The air in the room had changed. The space between us was no longer empty. It was charged, humming with a new, terrifying energy. I could feel the ghost of his touch on my skin for the rest of the day, a brand I couldn't ignore. The power dynamic began to shift in the second week. We'd finally agreed on a concept, a modern retelling of the Pygmalion myth, the sculptor who falls in love with his own creation. It was his idea, but it required a fusion of our skills. He would design the sculptural elements, the bold forms, but the project demanded hyper-realistic anatomical drawings to be layered over them. Drawings that were my specialty. He was a master of three-dimensional form, but his two-dimensional anatomical knowledge was surprisingly weak. He knew how a body felt, how it moved, how to imply weight and mass in clay. But he didn't know the names of the muscles, the precise way a tendon connected to a bone. He struggled for 2 days, his sketches growing more and more frustrated, the paper littered with angry, erased lines. Finally, he threw his pencil down with a clatter. It rolled onto my couch. He scrubbed a hand over his face, a gesture of pure defeat. "I can't do it," he bit out, not looking at me. "I can't get the structure right. It looks dead. There's no life in the lines." I hesitated. This was the chink in the armor, the first real crack in the facade of effortless confidence. He was asking for help. From me. My fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but something else stirred alongside it. A fledgling sense of purpose. I was the expert here. In this one specific area, I knew more than him. "You're thinking of it like a sculptor," I said softly, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "You're trying to build the form from the outside. You have to build it from the inside out. From the skeleton." He looked up at me, his eyes dark with frustration. "Show me." The words were a plea, a concession. I knelt beside him on the floor, the big sheet of paper between us. I picked up a fresh pencil. "Give me your hand," I said. He hesitated, then slowly extended his left hand, palm down, on the paper. His hand was huge, the fingers long and calloused. I gently began to trace the outline, my pencil a whisper against his skin. The contact was minimal, but it sent tremors through my entire body. I focused on the lines, on the anatomy. I had to. It was the only way to stay sane. "You start with the bones," I explained, my voice low and focused. I drew the delicate structure of the carpals and metacarpals inside the outline. Then you layer the muscles over them. The flexors here, the extensors here. You have to understand how they pull on the bones to create movement. That's what gives it life. He didn't say anything. He just watched, his gaze intense, as my hand moved, creating a living anatomy where his had been. I could feel the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor in his fingers. I was so close I could smell the faint, earthy scent of clay that clung to him. My world had shrunk to this single point of contact, to the space between my pencil and his skin, to the quiet sound of our breathing in the small room. I was teaching him, guiding him. And in that moment, we were not rivals, not opposites. We were just two artists sharing a secret language of line and form. The fear was still there, but now it was mingled with a dizzying, terrifying hope. The storm arrived like a judgment. One moment, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across my floor. The next, the sky had turned a bruised, angry purple, and the clouds opened up. Rain lashed against my windows in violent sheets, and the wind howled like a hungry animal. We were deep into the work, a comfortable rhythm finally established between us. I would sketch a section of anatomy, the complex musculature of the back, the delicate interplay of tendons in a foot, and he would use it as a reference, translating my flat lines into a three-dimensional language of shadow and form. The first clap of thunder was so loud it shook the building. I jumped, a pencil snapping in my hand. Julian just looked up towards the window, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," he said, his voice calm, amused. My heart, however, was not calm. Stuck. The word echoed in my head. Trapped. The smallness of my apartment, once a comfort, now felt claustrophobic. The charged atmosphere between us, which had been a low hum, was suddenly cranked up to a piercing shriek. And then, as if on cue, the lights flickered once, twice, and died. We were plunged into a sudden, disorienting darkness. The only light was the occasional, ghostly flash of lightning that illuminated the room in stark, terrifying detail, freezing Julian's face in a monochrome mask. The only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain and the frantic thumping of my own heart. "Stay put." Julian's voice came out of the blackness, startlingly close. "I think I saw some candles on your bookshelf." I heard him moving, a series of soft, careful footsteps. A moment later, a match scraped, and a tiny flame bloomed in the dark, casting his face in a warm, flickering glow. He lit 3 candles, placing them on the coffee table. The room was transformed. The shadows grew long and deep, dancing on the walls. My neat, orderly studio suddenly felt ancient, intimate, a cave against the storm. He sat back down on the floor, not far from me, but not too close either. The work was forgotten. The storm had imposed a truce. "You're afraid of storms?" he asked quietly, his voice different in the candlelight. Softer. "I don't like things I can't control," I admitted, my voice tight. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on one of the candle flames. "I get that." We sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't the awkward, tense silence of our first meeting. It was a heavy, weighted silence, full of unspoken things. The storm raged outside, a wild and violent counterpoint to the stillness in the room. "You know," he said, finally breaking the quiet, "I used to hate your work. The confession was so blunt, so unexpected, it knocked the wind out of me." I stared at him. His face was half in shadow, his expression serious. "I thought it was cold," he continued, still not looking at me. "Lifeless. All technique and no heart. I thought you were arrogant, hiding behind your perfect lines." I flinched. It was exactly what I'd always feared people thought. It was exactly what I sometimes thought about myself. "But I was wrong," he said, and now he turned to look at me, his gaze so direct it felt like a physical touch. "It's not cold. It's careful. It's quiet. You see things other people don't bother to look for. I make all this noise with my work. I throw clay around. I make these big, loud shapes because I'm terrified that if I stop, there'll be nothing there. Just emptiness." He let out a short, harsh laugh. "My confidence? It's a performance. It's the loudest costume I own." The raw honesty of his words stole my breath. This was the man behind the noise. The vulnerable, insecure artist he kept hidden from the world. He saw my work, the real me I tried to hide in my lines, and he wasn't repulsed. He was envious. "I always thought you were the real artist," I confessed, the words tumbling out of me before I could stop them. "Your work is alive. It's brave. I'm the one who's afraid. I draw lines around everything to keep it contained. To keep me contained, the space between us seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy. The storm outside faded to a distant roar. The world was just this small circle of candlelight, just his eyes reflecting the tiny flames. He was closer now. I hadn't seen him move, but he was closer. My entire body was a live wire. Every nerve ending screamed with a terrifying, exhilarating awareness of his proximity. The scent of him, clay and rain and warm skin, filled my senses. He lifted a hand, slowly, as if not to startle me. He didn't touch my face. He gently brushed his knuckles against the back of my hand, the one resting on the floor beside me. It was the same touch as before, but this time it wasn't an accident. It was a question. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. My body was frozen, caught between a lifetime of fear and a single, overwhelming moment of want. I turned my hand over a small, barely perceptible movement. An answer. His fingers laced with mine. His hand was so warm, so solid around my own. It felt like an anchor in the storm, both outside and inside me. He watched my face, his expression searching, vulnerable. He leaned in, and the world slowed down. I could see the flicker of the candlelight in the dark pools of his eyes. I could feel his breath, warm on my lips. My own breathing had stopped completely. This is it, my brain screamed. The point of no return. His lips met mine. It wasn't a hard, demanding kiss. It was impossibly soft, tentative, a ghost of a touch, asking for permission. It was a kiss that tasted of doubt and longing and a confession deeper than words. I leaned into it, a silent surrender, and the kiss deepened, but only slightly. It remained a quiet, searching thing, an exploration in the dark. It was the bravest I had ever been. It was the most terrified. In the heart of the storm, with his hand in mine, I finally understood that they were one and the same. I woke to silence, a profound, absolute silence that was more jarring than the storm had been. The rain had stopped. The wind was gone. The world outside my window was washed clean, bathed in the pale, watery light of dawn. And I was alone. For a moment, confusion reigned. My mind was a sluggish fog, trying to piece together the night. The candlelight, the confessions, the kiss, his hand in mine. I remembered falling asleep on the couch, his arm a heavy, warm weight around my shoulders, his steady breathing a lullaby against the dying storm. But the couch beside me was empty. The warmth was gone. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, pierced through the fog. I sat up, my heart starting to pound a familiar, frantic rhythm of anxiety. The room was tidy. The candles were gone, the floor cleared of our papers. It was as if he had meticulously erased all evidence of the storm, of the intimacy, of himself. There was no note. Of course there was no note. What would it have said? Sorry for the temporary lapse in judgment. Let's pretend last night never happened. My own mind supplied the cruelest possibilities. It was a mistake, a fluke brought on by the strange, confessional atmosphere of the storm and the darkness. He woke up in the cold light of day and was horrified by what he'd done, by who he'd done it with. With me, the quiet, anxious boy from the corner. The pencil boy. The shame was a physical thing, a hot, creeping flush that started in my chest and spread through my entire body. I had been a fool. I had mistaken a moment of vulnerability for something more. I had let him in, not just into my apartment, but into the carefully walled fortress of myself, and he had fled at the first sign of daylight. I curled into a ball on the couch, wrapping my arms around myself, tried to hold myself together. The silence of my apartment, once my greatest comfort, was now a deafening roar of absence. Every empty space screamed his name. The air felt thin, robbed of the energy his presence had filled it with. My solitude had returned, but it was tainted now, poisoned by the memory of not being alone. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a prison cell. The next 2 days were a special kind of hell. I didn't leave my apartment. I couldn't. I told myself it was because I needed to work on the project, but I didn't touch a single piece of paper. I just sat, staring at the blank walls, replaying every moment of that night, dissecting every word, every touch, searching for the exact point where I'd been so wrong. I sent him one text, a single, cowardly message. We still need to finish the project, no reply. The single word delivered under my message was a monument to my humiliation. Life drawing class was unavoidable. I walked in with my stomach full of bees, a buzzing nervous sickness. I took my usual spot in the far corner, building a wall of charcoal dust and anxiety around myself. He came in late. He didn't look at me. He walked to the opposite side of the room, as far away from me as he could possibly get, and set up his easel with a series of sharp, angry movements. The distance was back, but it wasn't the old, comfortable distance of unspoken rivalry. This was a new, jagged chasm, carved out by shared intimacy that was now being violently denied. It hurt. It hurt more than I could have imagined. For the entire 2-hour session, I could feel his presence like a physical weight on the other side of the room. I felt his avoidance. It was an active, aggressive silence that was louder than any of his usual boisterous noise. I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on my paper, but my lines were shaky, uncertain. My hand wouldn't obey. My vaunted control was gone. He had taken it with him when he slipped out of my apartment in the pre-dawn gray. I left the class the second it was over, practically running from the room, unable to bear another moment in that suffocating silence. The recoil was complete. The wall between us was rebuilt, higher and colder than ever before. And I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut, that it was all my fault. The knock on my door came on the third night. It was late, past midnight. The sound was so unexpected it made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one ever came to my door. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, my mind racing. It couldn't be him. It was just a neighbor, someone with a noise complaint, a package delivered to the wrong address. It couldn't be him. Another knock, louder this time, more insistent. With trembling hands, I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole, and my breath caught in my chest. It was Julian. He looked awful. Worse than awful. He was pale, his hair a mess, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. He hadn't shaved. He was wearing the same shirt he'd had on in class, now wrinkled and disheveled. He looked lost. My hand hovered over the doorknob, a war raging within me. Don't open it. Protect yourself. But the image of his haunted face in the distorted lens of the peephole broke through my defenses. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. He didn't try to push his way in. He just stood there, on my welcome mat, looking at the floor. "Leo," he said, his voice raw, like he'd been gargling gravel. Can we talk?" I opened the door wider, a silent invitation. He stepped inside, and once again, his presence filled the space, but this time it was a different kind of energy. Not the crackling, confident power from before, but something heavy, exhausted. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, refusing to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he started, the words coming out in a rush. "I'm so sorry. I'm an idiot. A coward." I just stared at him, my arms wrapped around my waist. I didn't know what to say. "I woke up," he continued, finally looking at me, his eyes pleading. "It was early, and the sun was coming up, and you were asleep on the couch. And you looked so peaceful. And I panicked. I just panicked." He took a step closer. "I don't do this," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "The quiet stuff, the talking, the feeling things. It's not my territory. My whole life I've just been loud. I make a mess, I break things, I build something new. That I understand. But this, with you, it was quiet and it was real, and it completely terrified me." He ran a hand through his already messy hair, a gesture of pure agitation. "So I ran. It's what I do. And it was the stupidest thing I've ever done. These last 3 days have been hell." The silence was... I couldn't stand it. "I missed," he trailed off, swallowing hard. "I missed the quiet in here. With you." His vulnerability was a disarming weapon. It stripped away all my anger, all my hurt, leaving only a raw, aching empathy. He wasn't a monster who had used me and fled. He was just a man who was as scared as I was. Maybe even more so. "I thought you regretted it," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I thought it was a mistake." "No," he said, his voice fierce, taking another step closer until he was standing right in front of me. "Leo, no, it wasn't a mistake. It was the only thing that's felt real to me in a very long time. That's what scared me." We stood there, breathing the same air, the truth finally laid bare between us. It was frightening, new territory for both of us. A map we would have to draw together. "I'm scared too," I admitted, and the confession felt like letting go of a breath I'd been holding my entire life. A slow, tired smile touched his lips. "Good," he said softly. "Then we can be scared together." He had a large portfolio case with him, which I hadn't noticed until he leaned it against my wall. He gestured towards it. "I finished it," he said. our project. He unzipped the case and pulled out the 5 large panels. I gasped. They were breathtaking. He had taken my precise, delicate anatomical drawings and seamlessly integrated them into his own bold, sculptural forms. He'd transferred my sketches onto a textured, plaster-like surface, so they looked like ancient frescoes, ghosts of life beneath a modern, chaotic skin of charcoal and ink. A perfect synthesis. A dialogue. Our 2 voices singing in harmony. The final panel was a depiction of a hand, larger than life, reaching out. It was a fusion of both our styles. The bones and muscles were rendered in my meticulous detail, but the form itself, the gesture, the raw power of it, was all Julian. "It's better with you in it," he said quietly, his eyes on the artwork, but I knew he wasn't talking about the panels anymore. He was talking about everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, holding it in his palm. It was a single, worn brass key. "This is for my studio," he said, pressing into my hand. My fingers closed around the cool metal. "So you never have to wait for me to let you in again. You can come and go whenever you want. The quiet is welcome there now." It was more than a key. It was an invitation, a promise. It was a tangible act of commitment that spoke louder than any of his previous noise. It was him giving me a piece of his world, a key to the place where he was his most true self. It was everything. I looked from the key in my hand to his tired, hopeful face. The fear was still there, a low hum in the back of my mind, but it was no longer the loudest voice. The loudest voice was a feeling I didn't have a name for yet, a feeling that felt a lot like coming home. The light in Julian's studio was different. It wasn't the controlled, sterile light of the university classrooms or the soft, gray light of my apartment. It was a living thing. It poured in through the massive, paint-splattered warehouse windows, catching on the dust motes that danced in the air, illuminating the beautiful chaos of his world. Half-finished sculptures stood like silent sentinels, draped in plastic sheeting. Shelves overflowed with tools, cans of paint, and lumps of clay. The air smelled of damp earth, turpentine, and freshly brewed coffee. It was a mess. It was his. And now, in a way, it was ours. A few weeks had passed since the night he gave me the key. A few weeks of tentative, wonderful discovery. We were learning a new language together, one made up of shared silences, late-night conversations over sketches, and the simple, profound comfort of working side by side. This morning, I was sitting on a rickety stool, a sketchbook open in my lap. Julian was across the room, working on a new piece, a massive torso taking shape on an armature. He was shirtless, his back to me, wearing only a pair of paint-stained jeans. The morning light sculpted the landscape of his back, highlighting the sharp line of his spine and the powerful curve of his shoulders. I wasn't drawing the model in the center of the room. I was drawing him. My pencil moved across the paper with a new kind of confidence. The lines were still precise, still mine, but they were infused with something new. A warmth, a life. I wasn't just capturing his anatomy. I was trying to capture the feeling of him, the quiet strength in his posture, the focused intensity that was a form of meditation. He turned, as if sensing my gaze, and caught me looking. I didn't look away. The old Leo would have snapped his sketchbook shut, a hot flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. The new Leo just held his gaze. A slow smile spread across Julian's face. Drawing me again, pencil boy. The name was an endearment now, a piece of our private history. "You're a compelling subject," I replied, my own smile feeling easy and natural. "You have very expressive scapulae," he laughed, a real, deep laugh that echoed in the huge space. It was a sound I'd come to love, a sound that no longer felt like a threat, but like a promise of joy. He walked over, wiping his clay-dusted hands on a rag, and leaned over my shoulder to look at the drawing. "You make me look better than I am," he said softly, his breath warm against my ear. "I just draw what I see," I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever said. He pressed a light kiss to the side of my head, a casual, domestic gesture that sent a jolt of pure happiness through me. He picked up one of 2 mismatched, steaming mugs from a nearby workbench and handed it to me. Coffee, strong and black, just how I liked it. He had remembered. We stood there for a moment, sipping our coffee in a comfortable silence, the sunlight warming our backs. It was so simple, so ordinary, and yet it felt like the most extraordinary thing in the world. This easy intimacy, this shared space. It was the future I had never been brave enough to even imagine for myself. I used to think my life was a finished drawing, a carefully rendered piece, where every line was exactly where it was supposed to be. I had built my world around control, around the safety of solitude. I thought art was about learning to see the world from a safe distance. Julian was the disruption, the unexpected, chaotic slash of charcoal across my pristine page. He didn't just enter my life. He crashed into it, forcing me out of my corner, messing up my perfect lines, and dismantling the fortress I had so carefully constructed. He forced me to see that I wasn't creating a sanctuary, I was building a prison. He didn't teach me how to see the world. He taught me how to be seen. He showed me that true art, true life, isn't about control. It's about the terrifying, beautiful risk of connection. It's about letting someone else see your unfinished parts, your messy drafts, and trusting them not to run away. He wasn't a distraction from my art. He became the heart of it. He was the plot twist I never saw coming, the vibrant, unexpected color that finally brought my grayscale world to life. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Have you ever had someone enter your life and completely change the way you see yourself and the world around you? Sometimes the greatest art we create is the life we build with someone else. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing for more just like it.